This is the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey y'all, welcome to the final podcast in the series where we're focusing on the practices of living a life in active recovery. So again, these practices are really the key to start creating and making changes in your life to ultimately bring you up from the low points that you feel like you are at right now. And the way that these podcasts in the month of May have been laid out is exactly how I encountered these practices in my story, and primarily during my time in rehab. And before jumping into this podcast, I just want to highlight and really call out that this is not the only way for individuals to find themselves from their utter low point in life, from the time where they feel like their life is unmanageable, and to work their way towards a better solution. It is just how I encountered these practices and found myself on the road to recovery, and I think there's power in that and in telling the story. And so this week's theme in this episode will be about community and the practice of building your community. And what I found is that deliberately building a community was something that I never intentionally pursued prior to entering rehab. Of course, I had community around me, and I had friends, I had family, I had loved ones, but I was never deliberate about building out that community and really monitoring kind of the overall health and well-being of my, I guess, call it social life or community. And really the reason for that pertaining to my battle with alcoholism was I isolated when I drank and when I was struggling. When I was going through difficult periods in my 12-year battle with alcoholism, I would physically set my phone aside, shut the blinds, and just disappear into myself. And then while I was going through the process of detoxing, I would find myself physically moving to areas in my house, like the depths of my basement, where I was attempting to be the furthest away and most hidden that I possibly could be, because I couldn't imagine or I couldn't perceive why anyone would want to have me in their life or be around me. And I was so ashamed that I could not figure this out by myself that I didn't want anyone else involved, and I didn't want help. I assumed and I figured that I had to do it alone. And so because of that, I pushed people away. And this is where a very odd dichotomy comes into play with regards to addiction and being able to take the step towards the path of entering a life in recovery. The need and the requirement to accept your struggles, in my case, to accept my addiction, my alcoholism, and the fact that I was an alcoholic, that acceptance was mine and my burden alone to carry. Nobody else could accept that I was an alcoholic for me. I had to do it entirely myself. However, as soon as that step was taken, as soon as I was truly bought off and accepted the fact that I was an alcoholic and took that personal responsibility, an entire community awaited me with open arms that I was completely unaware of. And this fact has taken me a little bit of time to sort of think through and parse out, because finding my solution to alcoholism did not work when I was trying to do it alone. I was reading a bunch of articles. I was getting and building up a bunch of self-knowledge, thinking that would enable me to work through and figure out how to become normal and allow alcohol into my life in a healthy and manageable manner. But it never did. And it took me accepting the fact that I was an alcoholic, no questions about it. And then the community really gathered around and supported. And so then after that personal acceptance, I find myself continually supported and assisted by my community, yet the entire beginning and requirement of this all was this acceptance that was entirely on me. So it's like for 12 years, I searched alone for the answer and the self-knowledge that would unshackle me from this disease and from this addiction. And in the end, really the only step that was required by me and that was required only by me was to say, yes, I truly accept and I truly believe that I'm an alcoholic. And when it comes to, community, and I guess also things such as like self improvement and pursuit of like fulfillment and passions, really it all comes back to the fact that at the core, human beings belong together. We have a striving and a hunger to be a part of a group and to be together. And in reflecting back on my life, the greatest types of groups and friendships that I have found have been a little bit like on the smaller side in terms of the count of people, but it's a group that had an intensity with regards to our focus on solving key and difficult problems. And really the fact that we trudged through these moments of suffering and difficulty together, and this incredible and unexpected bind was created. And really it feels like these relationships are connections that we will have for life. And that theme is really how and why I formed so many tight bonds during my time in rehab. Again, it was only 28 days long. Like it's not really all that great of time. And truly there was only because of the dynamic nature of rehab. So what I mean by that is like my day 1 in rehab is someone else's day 27 or 28. And so there's this high turnover rate. And so my experience was 28 days long, but my experience with other people whom I have formed extremely tight bonds with was not 28 days. Sometimes it was, a few of my closest friends from rehab, we spent less than a week together inside the walls of rehab. There was truly only one person who I spent all 28 days with that came in on the exact same day as me and that left on the exact same day as me. So it's really incredible the short period of time that is required to form these really intense relationships. And the other funny aspect about rehab is it was almost a time and an opportunity for me to remind myself how to engage socially and how to develop relationships again. Because honestly, I had spent 12 years isolating and pushing people away. And yes, I knew friendships and relationships with my family were important, but I was never able to truly enrich or develop those relationships much when I was fighting and struggling alone with my alcoholism. So one very key and important note about community and about relationships when it comes to addiction and alcoholism is relationships from the past are a very difficult and oftentimes delicate undertaking. As an addict, as an alcoholic, generally speaking, we have abused, we have trampled over, lied, manipulated in so many of our key relationships that even our closest loved ones are hesitant to open that relationship back up or to really commit to allowing trust to come back in. And I've seen that break people in my time after entering active recovery. They feel like they have been doing so much work and progressing so much on their own. It's almost like as the addict or as the alcoholic, you're wanting to scream out in these moments when you realize that a loved one doesn't trust you yet and just say, why? I'm doing all the things. I'm putting the work in. And that moment when an addict who is on the path of recovery gets sideswiped with a relationship that has not yet been restored, it's caused some of my close friends to relapse. And once again, it is an aspect of being on the road in the journey of recovery where you have to just focus in on what you can control in the situation. As it pertains to relationships, the only thing that you can do is be persistent in your pursuit of a life in active recovery. Stay on that path of active recovery. Do the things that you need to do to maintain your sobriety, to maintain yourself on the road of recovery, and allow those relationships to come back when the person or the people are ready. I would say always be open to discussion, but don't be pushy. Just focus on what you can control. Be genuine in your apologies for your past actions, but then also be prepared to move forward. Some of the relationships that we have had, that I have had in the past, have to be let go of. And I can't anchor myself or hold myself accountable to maintaining those relationships. Relationships are two-way streets. And so you as the addict and the alcoholic, you can only control your output into the relationship. The beautiful thing about entering into recovery is finding yourself a community and oftentimes a new community. Once you go through the process of truly accepting your addiction is quite easy. And then the incredible thing is all of a sudden you do not have to carry this burden of your addiction on your own. And again, I'm going to come back and just hammer this point. The acceptance is personal. The acceptance is your responsibility. Me accepting myself as an alcoholic could not be done by anyone else. But your maintenance and adherence to your life in recovery requires, one, a relationship with God or a higher power, and secondly, a strong community. You are not alone once you accept your problems and once you accept your addiction as they are in your life. And just to go back to my community in rehab, just to kind of paint the picture of how this all formed for me. it was just incredible how much love and support there was for each other. We were incredibly adamant about protecting each other's well-being and protecting each other's and our own ability to stay on the path of recovery and to focus on, in a lot of senses, getting ourselves to being on the journey of recovery. Rehab is such an interesting set of social dynamics. As odd as it sounds, for the cost and overall life disruption that going to rehab, I guess, sets you back. There are individuals that are not there for the right reason. And I witnessed and found myself in this incredible situation where this core group of us in rehab, the vast majority of us, I would say, but really the core strong group was intensely focused and protective of our ability to get ourselves really prepared to leave and find ourselves on the road of recovery. And again, there were individuals and situations in our time in rehab that were not conducive to that. And it was so humbling and an awesome experience to be a part of a group that really rallied around this idea of protecting ourselves and our adherence to being on the road to recovery. And that love and support was just something that I hadn't allowed into my life for quite some time. And it made me realize how many friendships and relationships with family I was missing out on. And so for me, coming out of rehab, I was truly committed to developing and growing and nurturing these relationships that were available to me. Again, I was not going to pursue a relationship that did not have anything in return. I was going to do the work required to apologize for my past actions and make amends. But then I also had to move forward. And so what I've done in my time after rehab is I have been incredibly deliberate about surrounding myself with a group of individuals that has a clear aim and purpose and that looks to better themselves as individuals and to better the whole of the group. And then I put in the work. That's one thing that when I was struggling and battling alcoholism on my own, that I was not willing to do. And it's one of the reasons I isolated is relationships take work. And I was putting so much effort and so much energy and had so much shame with regards to my battle with alcoholism that I did not want to or could not commit to doing the work. Another thing that I've been very deliberate about is reaching out, either to old friendships, old relationships, just to check in. And I've been, in doing that, I've been very open about sharing my struggles. Obviously, I'm on episode 15 of a podcast about how I'm an alcoholic. So this is kind of the extreme end of that sharing of struggles and difficulties. But there's a wide range of ways that you can do it with key relationships in your life. So figure out how you are comfortable opening up to key individuals or relationships or groups in your life, and really work on it, and know that it's not going to be comfortable the first time that you do it, the first time that you decide to open up. Despite all of the work and all of the sharing that I've done up to this point, when there's a new person that I haven't seen or talked to in quite some time, the "how are you doing" question winds up coming up. And I'll be quite honest, not every time do I share what the last year has entailed for me and my family. So you have to make those decisions kind of on an individual relationship level. And then the other thing that is just so key with regards to community is be there for others. And it's a wild thing about reflecting back on my time as an alcoholic or my time struggling with alcoholism is how selfish I had to be and I was in life because I did not have the capacity to help anyone else and to be there for anyone else. I was so self-absorbed and so exhausted from my pursuit of trying to fix this issue on my own that I didn't have the time or energy for others. And now that I've found myself on the road of active recovery, it's amazing how much time, energy, and focus I can have for other people. And 99% of the time, what that means is just to sit there and listen. And that's all you have to do. And it sounds ridiculous, but I truly did not have the energy or the capacity to do that when I was battling alcoholism. Just looking at the communities that I have in my life and layering on that definition that I alluded to earlier with regards to having a clear vision or focus. I'm so grateful to say that my family that has been there for me through all this time is the key community that I have. And I just feel so lucky and blessed and humbled that they are still there for me despite everything that has been going on in my life. Another key community is the recovery community. So that includes the individuals I went to rehab with, as well as the very specific AA meeting that I go to in the mornings. And then obviously some of the kind of standard ones like your high school, college friends. But then I've been able to expand that community group even broader now to include, the core team that I work with on a daily basis. You all in the Chapter 3 Stigma community that have been following along on this weird journey that we're on with this. And it has really been unbelievably incredible how, the saying goes, a rising tide raises all boats. And you can really experience and witness in a good, strong, solid community how the whole becomes so much greater than the sum of all the parts. And so, in closing, establish your community, support others, give willingly of your time and your abilities, and I guarantee that your life will be incredibly enriched. I just want to take a moment and thank you all so much for following along during this time in these podcast episodes where we focus on the pillars and then the practices of living a life in active recovery. Spoiler, this is incredibly selfish as it has helped me clarify and focus in on the key areas of my life that I need to maintain and continue to have sharp focus on to ensure that I stay on the road of active recovery. So what's next? I ultimately want to work towards the namesake of this podcast, and that entails getting into the Alcoholics Anonymous book, which is really ultimately just a piece of literature on alcoholism and addiction. We're not going to get deep into the weeds on the practices and traditions of AA. I personally really enjoy AA, but I don't want to feel like I'm leading people down a path that they must travel in order to maintain a life on active recovery. There are so many paths that you can take to get there. However, the literature and the lessons are just profound. So I want to spend some time digging into that content and delivering it here. Again, taking my story and layering it on top of some of the key principles and lessons that were written, almost 100 years ago at this point. And really, I believe for those of you who are not alcoholics yourself, but have been following along because you have loved ones who are suffering, I feel like the next few podcast episodes will be very enlightening for you and offer in some further insight into why we think and behave the way that we do. And so I'm very excited to put together this next part of the podcast, and again, we will just kind of see where it goes from there. So again, I'm extremely grateful for those of you that have been following along. Share it with others. Like it on the platform of choice that you're listening to this on. It does help spread the word of Chapter 3 Stigma. So that's all I've got. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time.